What's your name, sir?
Dougie Jones.
And where do you live, Mr. Jones?
Home.
Personal favorite scene. Any thoughts? Do you feel like there was something that stood out in particular, or anything that's most worth commenting on, Colin?
For me, and this is more so something that's like was something I was really into like before I even got into Twin Peaks. And Joel actually mentioned on your shows that I was someone who was a fan of Chromatics years before I even got into Twin Peaks. And this is from Johnny Jewel's Windswept album, and it was an album. It was my favorite of his solo album. I guess for anyone who's watching, I should mention that Johnny Jewel, before the Chromatics disbanded, he was the producer, guitarist, keyboardist, and he made solo albums, sometimes for soundtracks, sometimes just for his own thing. And I always thought that even before getting to Twin Peaks, that album had a certain duality to it. And this is one of those songs, like it was very early on in the album. And I kind of view it as like if he were to make a soundtrack for Twin Peaks: The Return, this would have been it. And there's just something about the way that that song plays. It's just a very. I know that this is a build up for something that's like indescribable to me, but it's just something about that soundtrack that just feels so perfect for what was left off in the previous part and come into this part.
That's awesome. I've played that song more than any other song since Encountering the Return. Just I've had that on a loop in my classroom a million different times.
I mean, I don't blame you. Like, I think it is like I do stand by. It's heads and shoulders like the best Johnny Jewel solo album out there. So I think that I there's at least as terms of just strictly music, I think this scene was like this was just a great moment for it.
I didn't intend this, but to have this scene juxtaposed against the scene we just watched before it, with so much noise and so much chaos, and this one being so quiet and really so emotional in a different way. I just thought that was really interesting as far as like the range. And the thing that stood out to me was Kyle MacLachlan just that whatever those emotions are, exhaustion, confusion, just the way he plays that is just incredible. How about you, Andrew?
Well, there's a few things that really stick out. I mean, obviously, Windswept is a great choice. You know that most of what Johnny Jewel does is gold. But also, yeah, and what I like about that scene is how much it relies on context. Like, there's something so wistful and sad about it. To see him look at this statue that almost calls to mind who he, really is, and it's like it has an effect on him, but he can't, he's not there yet. He can't put it together. So there's this kind of wistful and faintly sad element to it that I really like. And then just Naomi Watts saying "That's on a good day," juxtaposed with how out of it he is just one of my favorite lines, really, probably in the show.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I want to second the performance for Kyle MacLachlan there. He's brilliant in that scene because there's so little Cooper there, and but there is a full character there. I mean, there's this I think somewhat complex character in that, and I've written about this, so I'm probably a broken record, but the neat thing about Dougie is the way he influences other people, the way he radiates goodness. And so you have this police officer come over who's essentially, encountering someone who's loitering there. And the police officer is so benevolent. He gently takes him by the arm. He escorts him home and brings him home. And then, of course, the way Dougie Cooper, touches the badge, there's that element of, he remembers being a law enforcement officer, and he was a good guy, and all of that's wrapped up in there. But it's very subtle, and I think MacLachlan really sells it. It's a really nice scene.
Yeah. So,
I think one element I was really struck by watching it, both this time, but also even more maybe in context, is the lighting. Because it does pick off from the previous episode but there's a very different visual palette to it. Like the previous one, it's dusk and the lights have not yet turned on in that plaza. And there's like more of kind of an acute melancholy to it for me. And plus also that's watching it the first time, that's the first time you hear that music and the credits start to roll and it's just him kind of touching the shoe. And it's this almost like poetic little scene. And this scene, I know I'm getting off of the lighting, but I'll get back to that in a second. But this scene is like much more plot heavy in a way, where it's like the guy's coming there trying to get him back home and trying to figure out what he's doing there and all of that. But the thing that really sets it off from the other, when you kind of see him back to back, is now it's night and all the lights have come on, but it's sort of like a ghost town. You know, it's this beautiful green glass backdrop and these little pools of light under all of the little, you know, corporate plaza trees or whatever. And it's like, it just creates this whole different effect in the sense of kind of crowdedness, but also emptiness there, which I think is the perfect backdrop for this encounter. And this sense that Dougie is kind of lost in this world, you know. So that was what I got from it, I think, on this, on looking at it through this lens.
You're making me think, one of the writing prompts that is very accessible to most 8th graders who I teach is writing prompts about mood, you know, like how is the mood created and what are, you know, different sort of techniques that combine together to create a mood. Yeah, and this scene is really, really great for that. What would you say contributes to the mood if you all had to pick maybe one thing?
I know John and Joel were talking about it. Actually, I think all of us were really talking about it. But for me, the way that Kyle portrays Dougie Jones, because I took Dougie Jones on a kind of serious manner like pretty early on. But I know a lot of people, it's like when we get to this scene and the scene closing out from the previous part, that there's something else underneath them, that there's a Dale Cooper that really wants to get out there, but he can't really convey it. And I think that just through the silence that Kyle MacLachlan portrays, I think it's like absolutely remarkable to me.
Yeah, the fact that he's pulling his arm into the sleeve like that it sort of recalls what happened to him when he had the Alcave ring and his arm went numb. It's almost as if the character is trying to sort through overlapping memories from different beings, you know, that are all kind of coalescing, and he's trying to sort through to figure out who he really is. It's really interesting.
I guess, John, I do have one question, because I never thought of like the connection of the Alcave ring, at least specifically to this scene. But do you think that the fact that he wears a green jacket primarily throughout the return is the ring or some that permeates like this kind of thought process throughout the Vegas storyline, or is it just for this one particular scene?
Yeah, I don't think the ring really has a lot of resonance here. I mean, the green jacket is gone after this. He gets back into the black jacket, right? Janie washed it for him or something, and then he's back in it for the rest of the story. But I mean, obviously, the Alcave ring, well, it bounces around quite a bit in the story, but I think whatever happened to him, it's still there somehow. But I'm not sure. I mean, you could certainly make a connection to the color of the jacket, but I never thought about it before.
Okay. Yeah, because for me, whenever I think of green, and not just Twin Peaks, but David Lynch's filmography, I think of it, because I think of like red as being a bit of an insidious color. Blue, it's a little complex, but I think it's like there's a certain sadness to it. But green, I always kind of thought was like a neutral, but it leans towards potentially nefarious. It depends on the scene, but I think of like, for example, when Philip Jeffries emerges in Fire Walk with Me, or the green carpeting in Lost Highway. I always think of green as used in these very deliberate manners where it just seems like something's a little off. And I'm glad you actually brought up the whole thing about the jacket, where the green jacket is effectively discarded shortly after this, because I should probably mention I haven't done a rewatch of The Return since late 2022, so I'm a little fuzzy on certain aspects, but that's just where I stand with the color green when Lynch uses it.
Yeah, I think there's a reference to a man in a green jacket in Inland Empire too. If not, we don't actually see him. They talk about him. I can't remember. Inland Empire is a tough one. So,
Incidentally,
the
the
male
other
rabbit,
what's that?
like the boy rabbit, I think wears the green jacket.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I'll have to look at that again, but I do know. I think it's either someone mentions a man in a green jacket, or there is a man when they're in the Polish scenes, or in like the men are sitting around the table talking. I can't remember, but I remember when I was writing about The Return and was so deep into it. I remember catching that, that echo that was there from Inland Empire, but I didn't explore it. So.
Can anybody briefly summarize the scene that we just watched?
I guess in a concise manner, it's melancholic. If I just had to use one word, and I can expand further that I think of like with The Return, I think of themes of almost confinement. We see this like with Dougie, where it's like I was saying before, it's Dale Cooper, but he can't really get out of this just yet. But I think of other things of confinement, whether it's like Norma at the Double R, where she's always at that back corner. Ben Horn is primarily in his office. Duncan Todd is behind his desk, like pretty much all, if not all, the scenes. So I think of confinement is like a big part that's like throughout a big theme of The Return for me. And I think this scene is sort of like Dougie being aware that there's a much larger task at role, but he's like stuck in this for at that point he has no idea how long.
Thank you.
I would say it's another example. This scene is another example that Dougie, there's something always saves Dougie. The Dougie's stuck out there, but he gets home, and whenever he gets into some sort of trouble, something comes along and saves him.
He deserves it. It seems like he deserves it. I mean, the guy's been through hell. Let's be honest. Even if this guy was, or some version of him was sitting in the Red Room, whatever that is, for 25 years, witnessing all kinds of kooky stuff, he deserves a little empathy, I think, and I'm sure he's pretty exhausted at this point. This to me almost feels like the whirlwind of the past few days or years or whatever it is. It's almost finally settled, and like that long day of work, it's just, this is pure exhaustion, maybe realization that now we have to go forward from this moment. Like when you have that just chaos, that little bit of chaos in your life, and then it dies down and it's quiet, and everything sort of sinks in.